tackling chapter 12. This is the 12th week. We're tackling chapter 12 today. One of my favorite chapters. It's about morality, religion, and justice. It's not a very long chapter, but I've got some things to say. This is an interesting picture. This is actually the third time I've tried to try to record this lecture. The other two times I was interrupted. Well, first time I was interrupted by a telephone call. Second time I was interrupted by the idiot dogs that I have. They all happen to be in the room as I start this lecture. So we'll see how this thing goes. This is a picture of a temple on a peninsula on a Greek island. So it's kind of an interesting picture. There's a bench, and here's a bench right here. This is a motor scooter, and there's the guy who's driving the motor scooter right there. Anyway, kind of curious. Let's go ahead and get started. There we are. You can see it better. There's a guy who drove the motor scooter. There's the scooter. I don't know, maybe that's his motorcycle. It's kind of hard to say. Anyway, okay, let's get started. Morality, religion, and justice. The first thing we're going to talk about is ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism leads people to assume that their own culture's ways are better or more natural than that of others. This is one of the reasons that Europeans wreaked so much havoc in the Americas. The Europeans did because they felt that their morality was superior, their religion was superior to that of the indigenous people that they came in contact with. The Spanish tried to convert all the indigenous people tried to convert all the indigenous people to Catholicism, and of course the French were Catholic as well. They tried to convert all the indigenous people to Catholicism, but the Protestants weren't any better. The English and the Dutch did exactly the same thing when they landed in North America as compared to South and Central America. Yeah, the Europeans are pretty bad at the ethnocentrism. You can understand what ethnocentrism is. My culture's better than your culture. My culture's better than yours. But we see this also in indigenous people. In just your name, in the name of your tribal group. Dene means children of the holy people. If the Dene are the children of the holy people, what are other tribes, the Utes and the Comanches and anybody else, Hopi, all the Pueblos Indians, what are they the children of? You see it in other native groups, tribes. The Comanche is a Ute word that means people that attack us all the time, or the people that attack. The Comanche certainly don't refer to themselves as the people who attack people all the time. They call themselves the Numina, which means the people. The Nez Perce is a French word that means people with pierced noses, which they actually didn't do, as odd as that is. Nez Perce refer to themselves as the Nimepu. Nimepu, in their language, means we the people. And if you wander around the Indian country, you'll see that just about everybody's name wasn't what they didn't really refer to themselves by the name that they were given. The Sioux, for example, Sioux means enemy in Chippewa, or Anishinaabe, or Ojibwe, but it means Sioux means the enemy. So as you can see, everybody refers to themselves as And that's a form of ethnocentrism, what you refer to yourself, what you call yourself. You don't call yourself by your enemies, what your enemies call you call yourself by who you think you are. And of course, everybody feels that their civilization is superior to everybody else's, and therefore ethnocentrism is alive and well just about everywhere. Ethnocentrism. So in order for everybody to live happily together, we need to figure out what to refer to people as. There are a lot of words that are fairly insulting. Navajo, for example, could mean a lot of different things. One of them is thief, and I'm not sure anybody wants to be referred to as the thief people. Gypsy, the Romany people were referred to as gypsies forever. And to gyp somebody is to cheat them as if they were a gypsy. That's what gypped means. I got gypped on that deal. They refer to themselves, of course, as the Romany people. So this is something to think about when we start talking about other groups. Who are they, and what do they want to be called? Ethnocentrism is the idea that my group is better than your group, and we deserve to tell you how to live. Ethnocentrism. This is Lawrence Kohlberg. 1971, he developed his stages of moral development. Lawrence Kohlberg is really kind of interesting. He went to the University of Chicago. He taught at the University of Chicago for a while, and then he moved to Harvard. And strangely enough, he committed suicide at age 59 due to depression caused by a parasitic infection that he picked up in 1971 in Belize. Anyway, in 1971, he also published, so most of this research that we're going to be talking about for the next 5 or 6 slides refers to the research by Lawrence Kohlberg. He not only did his research in the United States, but he also did research in other countries and other areas with other individuals, not just with white Americans or even just Americans. He also looked at other groups in other places. His 3 stages of moral development, level 1 is the pre-conventional level, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Level 2 is the conventional level, and level 3 is the post-conventional level. The pre-conventional moral reasoning suggests that people interpret morality based on a calculation of how much better or worse off they would be for acting in a certain way. Morality at this level is about trying to behave in a way that provides the best overall return for you. So it's an individualistic way of looking at morality. According to Kohlberg, this was the way that children develop morality. They develop a pre-conventional form of morality. What can I get out of whatever I'm doing? I want a cookie. I've got a cookie. But if my mom told me not to take the cookie because then we wouldn't have any for supper or for dessert after supper. So what do? Do I eat the cookie or do I save it for everybody else? And that is a child's way of looking at morality. The conventional moral reasoning is about viewing actions as moral to the extent that they help maintain and facilitate the social order. This level dictates that morality is about following the rules, and individuals should not question where those rules come from. And this is if the pre-conventional moral reasoning has to do with the individual, this one has to do with society. What is the best for society? So the conventional level is what is best for society. The post-conventional moral reasoning is based on the consideration of abstract ethical principles of what is right and wrong. The moral decisions are reached based on the logical extensions of those principles. Good behavior is seen as that which is consistent with set of universal ethical principles that emphasize justice and individual rights. The problem with this is that there are no universal ethical principles of justice and individual rights. A good example would be the Russian attack on the Ukraine. It doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense unless you're a Russian. Do they have different ethical principles? What's going on here? Are they committing war crimes by attacking the Ukraine? What is the rationale for attacking? Are there any universal ethical principles? And of course, that will be determined after the war is over. Right now, no one can tell the Russians what to do, and they don't seem to be backing off at all. So the post-conventional morality is really kind of an interesting concept because it assumes that there are universal ethical principles. Is this just a Western way of looking at the world? And the answer is, well, there is no answer. But the Western world likes to think that their concept of universal ethical principles is the right one, but is that a form of ethnocentrism? Snary in 1985 did a meta-analysis of the 27 cultural areas from around the world that had been tested using Kohlberg's parameters. And this is what he was doing down in Belize when he picked up the parasite that eventually created his depression and eventual suicide. But he was wandering around the world, looking at all these different cultural groups to determine what was going on. There was some universality in moral reasoning, but it wasn't actually universal. In all cultures, there were some individuals who reasoned at the conventional levels, and in no cultural group did the average adult reason at the pre-conventional level. So there was a degree of universality, but that universality stopped at the conventional level. Evidence of post-conventional moral reasoning was not universally found. Moral reasoning based on justice and individual rights. Every urban Western sample contained at least some individuals who showed reasoning based on justice and individual rights. Not a single person from the traditional tribal and village folk populations showed such reasoning. So this is like self-actualization, the concept of self-actualization. This only exists in certain moral structures, self-actualization, and this idea of universal justice and individual rights. It only exists in certain perfect situations, and that those situations tend to only occur in industrialized countries, not in non-industrialized countries. One reason for the discrepancy between traditional societies and more urbane Western societies may be because of the educational experiences of both societies. Traditional educational practices may not include the same ideas of justice and individual rights. One of the things that we do know about the education in the United States is that it was developed to help assimilate the people coming in from Eastern Europe and Western Europe. We had this huge influx of people from Eastern and Southern Europe in the end of the 19th century. And because of that, we changed the way that we educated people. There was a lot more propaganda in what we were telling people. We wanted people to become Americans. They were coming from a monarchical political system where one person was in charge and they made up all the rules. But they were coming into a political system in the United States that was somewhat democratic. And because of that, we needed to assimilate them away from this idea that one person has all the right answers to an idea that we get to make up all the rules, or the people get to make up all the rules. And this was a huge change from what they had seen before. Some of these individuals weren't allowed to own cattle, for example. They weren't allowed to own land. All the land belonged to the king or whoever was in charge in wherever they were. And because of this, of course, we needed to educate them. We needed to assimilate them into the American mindset. We needed to make them into Americans. So this is one of the reasons why the educational system was the way it was. Now, unfortunately, of course, at the same time, we were opening the boarding schools for the indigenous people of the Americas, well, for the people in the United States anyway, and they did the same thing up in Canada. And so what happened was the same educational process was being used for the Indian tribes, the American Indian tribes, or the First Nation people up in Canada, as was being used to assimilate all these masses of immigrants coming in from Eastern Europe, Hungary, the Ukraine, Slovenia, the Austrian, what was the Austrian Republic at the time, from Germany, from Italy, from Greece. All of these people were coming in. They had different ideas of what right and wrong were, and we needed to assimilate their children, especially assimilate their children into the American way of thinking. And so we created this educational process. Okay, part of that had to do with this pre-conventional idea that there are universal rights and wrongs. In other words, if Germany does something horrible, grotesque that we don't agree with, they have broken this universal idea of individual rights and justice for everyone. One of the things you may not have been taught, unless you had world history, was that in 1848 there was a revolution all over the world, in most of Europe, in France, in England, in Germany, in Italy. There was this huge revolution, this individualistic revolution. And in Europe, what happened was that most of the monarchical structures, these oligarchies that they maintained in Europe, they won. And a lot of the rebels, the people that they didn't like, the people with ideas of individual rights and universal justice, these people were kicked out of those countries. So where did they go? Well, they came to the United States primarily, and they also went to Canada. Not as many went to Canada as the United States. Much easier to come to the United States because we were accepting all of those individuals. And anyway, there was this huge influx of new ideas coming into the United States, and a lot of that got into the educational system as well. Another explanation for the discrepancies between traditional and Western cultures is that the two types of cultures live in different environments. Because of the harsher environment, tribal and village populations have more concerns than justice and individual rights. And these are situations where they were in a subsistence situation. They couldn't worry about justice. They couldn't worry about whether I get to do this or I don't get to do this. They were just worried about survival. They were in a subsistence situation. They were allowed to keep as much food as they needed to stay alive, but a lot of times they weren't allowed to keep as much as they wanted or as much as they potentially needed. So it was all subsistence living. They weren't allowed to have livestock. I can remember reading about Poland, the area that became Poland. And in that area, the peasants of Poland were not allowed to eat meat. They were given meat twice a year. They were given meat at Christmas, and they were given meat at Easter. And that's the only time they were allowed to eat meat. Schrader and colleagues in 1977 argued that Kohlberg's model of moral reasoning only represented one of the three codes that people use for moral judgments around the world. Ethics of autonomy. And actually, ethics of autonomy fits Kohlberg's model better than anything else. But the other two were ethics of community and ethics of divinity. Schrader and his group referred to Kohlberg's model as an ethic of autonomy. The ethic views morality in terms of individual freedom and rights violations. An act is seen as immoral under the ethic of autonomy when it directly hurts another person or infringes on another's rights and freedoms as an individual. And if you think about it, a lot of the arguments that we hear as to whether something was right or wrong has to do with how much this infringed on somebody else's rights. A second code of ethics that Schrader and colleagues proposes is an ethic of community, which emphasizes that individuals have duties that conform with their roles in a community or social hierarchy. According to this code, there is an ethical principle to uphold one's interpersonal duties and obligations toward others. Actions are seen as wrong when individuals fail to perform their duties. And so this is the ethic of community. If I'm supposed to, let me give you an example. When we lived in Germany, coming from the United States, of course, we weren't used to the rules and the laws that they followed in Germany. We lived in a little village called Mauschbach. And in Mauschbach, every Thursday you were supposed to clean your stairs. You're supposed to sweep them off, and you were supposed to wash them off with water. And everybody did this. So on Thursday morning, all the women went outside and they washed their front stoops. So that if they lived on a sidewalk, they cleaned the sidewalk, they cleaned their steps off. Now, we didn't know anything about this. Luckily, we didn't have a sidewalk that we had to clean, but we were supposed to clean our steps. And the landlord came and told us, you didn't clean your steps. And we didn't understand what they were talking about. So we swept the steps and we thought, okay, so who cares if I've got dirt on my steps? You've got, it's mud all the way up to my house from the where we parked our cars. So what's the probability of being able to keep the steps clean? But he kept getting in trouble because we weren't cleaning our stairs. That was the ethics of community. In that community, every Thursday you cleaned your steps one way or the other. And if you didn't, then somebody told you you needed to. Now, there wasn't a law. It's not like they came and arrested us. But we were told over and over again that we needed to clean our steps. And of course, we didn't really understand because, we were military people. We didn't understand. Didn't understand that anybody could have a rule that you were supposed to clean your steps off every Thursday. But they were going, everybody cleans their steps on Thursday. The third code that Schrader and colleagues suggested was an ethic of divinity, which is concerned with the sanctity and the perceived natural order of things. This code contains the ethical principle that one is obligated to preserve the standards mandated by a transcendent authority. Actions are seen as immoral if they cause impurity or degradation to oneself or to others, or if one shows any disrespect for God or God's creations. This is a picture of a riot that occurred in India. A young lady was wearing, a 12-year-old girl was herding her goats, and she was wearing her brother's pants. She was wearing pants because it was easier to deal with it. It was a muddy day. It was during the monsoon season, and she was wearing pants. And because of this, the men of the village thought that she was being immoral, the natural order of things. So they raped and murdered her because she was dressing in an immoral fashion. And the women of the village, of course, became very upset. And that's what this whole demonstration is about the fact that those men, the men that murdered her and raped her, had they claim that it was incorrect for them to do that. The men claim natural order of things. As it turned out, the girl that was raped and murdered was a Muslim, and the men that raped and murdered her were Hindus, and so we got that whole religious thing going on. The argument between Allah or the Hindu gods. She was insulting the Hindu gods, and of course Allah. The question was, should this have happened? And this was an international incident for a while, and then it kind of dropped off the map. So I'm not exactly sure what happened, if the men were prosecuted or what happened. This is the mother of the little girl. German sociologist Ferdinand Tönnies argued that there are two ways that people can relate to each other in a group. One is Gemeinschaft and the other is Gesellschaft. Gemeinschaft is the community relations bind people together with the social glue of concord. That's like everybody on Thursday cleans their front stoop. Gesellschaft is people acting as individuals and have a weak bind with society. And of course, that was us. We were acting as individuals. My wife and I, we didn't really understand the rules, but we were acting as individuals, and therefore sweeping our steps seemed like the silliest thing in the world that we could possibly do. Gemeinschaft groups are characteristic of small folk group organizations, and within these groups, interpersonal relationships play an especially important role. So things are dictated by the people that you are around. They're the ones that tell you what to do. That's Gemeinschaft. So some of these rules may not be followed someplace else, but because you live in this village, you follow these rules. That wasn't the way it was with cleaning your front steps. That was a national thing in Germany. It wasn't just a Mauschbach thing. It was a national thing. People feel connected to one another because they feel a unity of spirit. The relationships are central to an individual's identity. I'm from Mauschbach, therefore I do this. I'm a Mauschbacher. Mauschbach actually means Mouse Creek or Mouse Brook. So I'm a mouser? I don't know. Anyway, obligations associated with one's Gemeinschaft carry weight of full moral obligations because it's Gemeinschaft. So if you come from this village, this is what you do. Gesellschaft are groups that are characteristic of modern Western societies and treat relationships as imaginary, instrumental, as a means to an end. Gesellschaft groups are perceived as relatively impersonal and somewhat contractual, which leads to necessity of justice obligations to govern disputes between individuals. In Gesellschaft groups, individuals can't be expected always to behave in pro-social ways toward others because they have strong obligations toward them. So formalized rules are necessary to keep people in line. Now, the deal with Gemeinschaft is that everybody knows the rules because everybody comes from this village. And that's what binds us together, these rules that we wear clothes that look like this or whatever. Gesellschaft, on the other hand, is like what happens in the United States. In order for everybody to follow the same rules, they have to formalize those rules. So there are speeding laws, there are drinking laws, there are laws that govern a lot of different things in the United States because we need people not to drink and drive. People the world over feel a moral obligation to their community. Objective obligations. People believe that they have an obligation to act in a certain way, even if there is no official rule or law that requires them to do so. Legitimately regulated, people should be prevented from engaging in moral violation, or they should be punished if they act in such a way. I'm reading a book called Raintree County. It's an old book that was written in 1948, but it's about my area of Indiana back in the 19th century, and it's really kind of interesting because these kinds of questions come up all the time. The hero of the book is a non-believer. He wasn't a non-believer all of his life, but he became an atheist after thinking about how much sense any of these things make. And because of that, he got in trouble, and they were going to ride him out of town on a rail, tar and feather him, and ride him out of town on a rail because he was an atheist. They also thought that he was an adulterer because he was alone with a woman that potentially he could have had sex with. Not that he had had sex, but that he possibly could have had sex with. And because of that, they were going to punish him for appearing potentially to have had adulterous sex with this woman, and because he was a non-believer. And that's, of course, the way things work sometimes in select communities. It was really kind of interesting when I was, my wife was stationed at Columbus Air Force Base. That's Columbus Air Force Base is in Columbus, Mississippi. We lived in a rural area, and in that rural area, for some reason, you weren't supposed to wear yellow shorts. I had a pair of running shorts at the time that were yellow, and sometimes I wore those yellow running shorts, and people would come up to me and tell me that I wasn't supposed to wear those yellow running shorts because you're not supposed to wear yellow pants, yellow shorts. You're not allowed to do that, and I would do that because they were just a pair of running shorts. And for some reason, people would get angry with me. And I had one guy that chased me down the road one time. Another guy set his dog on me because I was running down the road with my yellow shorts on, as strange as that is. But of course, I didn't stop because of I didn't recognize their right to tell me what to do. And of course, they tried to punish me, but it didn't work. Ethic of divinity involves a moral code respecting the sanctity of the natural order of things as dictated by a transcendent moral authority. Now, the problem is, what is that transcendent moral authority? Immoral, and where does it come from? And the answer is usually it comes from written text. And of course, any written text has to be interpreted in order to understand what that moral authority is. Immoral actions are perceived to violate natural order of things. And of course, whether you're a Christian or a Hindu or a Muslim, that is the transcendent moral authority. Hunter in 1991 proposed that a culture war exists in the United States and that the battle lines are drawn between those who have an impulse toward orthodoxy and those who have an impulse toward progressivism. And of course, we're going through this right now. Republicans and Democrats. The Democrats tout their progressivism, and Republicans tout their orthodoxy. And of course, they use other buzzwords like pinko and Nazi, but when Republicans are trying to insult Democrats, they refer to them as progressives and communists and socialists, and of course the liberal and liberals, and of course the liberal left is not as good at calling people names. They rarely use the fascist and Nazis, but it does seem to come out of the mouth of senators, Republican senators. Lindsey Graham said that he's not going to vote for Ketanji Brown Jackson because she's too progressive. She's a communist and a socialist, and he doesn't want anybody like that on the Supreme Court. But of course, That is an interpretation, and he's using buzzwords to attack people. Religious adherents who are orthodox are committed to the idea of transcendent authority. This authority is viewed to have existed long before humans and is operating independently of people. This authority is believed to be more knowledgeable and more powerful than all of human experience. So you can't experience something that would give you more information that is controlled and understood by this transcendent authority figure. In the Orthodox view, this transcendent authority created a moral code and revealed it to human beings in sacred texts. The moral code is perceived to stand across all times and circumstances and should not be altered to accommodate any social changes or individual differences. And of course, this is an argument between Republicans and Democrats, between constitutional purists. Some people think that we should follow the Constitution as it was written. Of course, it was written in 1789. 1789 was a long time ago. A lot of things have changed since then. So if we were purists, constitutional purists, of course, does that mean that we can't drive cars or use our cell phones or watch television because that didn't exist? Now that's, of course, taking things a bit far, but the idea is that the Constitution is this pure idea that we have to follow, and we can't change the point of the way it was written. Individuals in society are expected to adapt themselves to this ordained moral code. Adherents of progressive religions emphasize the importance of human agency in understanding and formulating a moral code. Progressivists reject the view that a transcendent authority reveals itself and its will to humans. They believe that humans play an integral role in the formulation of moral codes. In other words, they are the ones that have to interpret it. Progressivists believe that because social circumstances change, the moral code must change along with them. And one of the things to remember is that when the Constitution was written, when that moral code was written, slavery was legal. Not only was it legal, but it was supported. It's not really supported in the Constitution as per se, but it was around. And so when they said that all men are created equal, they actually meant men, because women weren't allowed to have anything to do with politics. And also, African Americans were American citizens, but American Indians weren't. African Americans were second-class citizens. They weren't even second-class citizens. They were like cattle. They were owned like chattel. So progressives believe that you need, as times change, you need to change these moral codes. But people that are orthodox have a difficult time thinking about changing these moral codes. In 2007, Haidt and Graham expanded Schrader's 3 moral ethics by expanding it to 5. This is Haidt, this is Haidt, and this is Graham right here. So their 5 moral ethical codes are: avoid harm, protect fairness, be loyal to your in-group, respect hierarchy, and achieve purity. Avoid harm. People are sensitive to any behaviors that cause harm to others. So, of course, you don't want to hurt anybody. Protect fairness. They attend closely to whether resources or rights are distributed in a fair way. Loyalty to their in-group. People are motivated to identify with their in-group, to make sacrifices for their in-groups, and to trust in-group members more than they trust out-group members. Now, this can be a problem, because when you trust your group more than you trust somebody else, it's like you're saying that they're not as good as you are. So you reject them. You're rejecting this group. Respect hierarchy. People tend to respect hierarchy by admiring their superiors and believing subordinates need to act in accordance with the wishes of authority figures. Achieve purity, reflecting the ethic of divinity. People are motivated to achieve purity and are disgusted at behaviors ruled by the carnal passions, such as lust and gluttony, or by behaviors that suggest contamination of any kind. And that is what we should be seeking, purity. There's a greater emphasis on faith in Christianity, especially Protestantism, than in Judaism. Membership in Judaism is defined by descent. Traditionally, one becomes Jewish by being born to a Jewish biological mother. So if your mother is Jewish, then you are Jewish. If your mother is not Jewish, then you can't be Jewish, even if your father is Jewish. While Christianity is based on beliefs, traditional Judaism emphasizes particular practices, such as keeping kosher by avoiding certain foods like pork. So as far as Christianity is concerned, it's what you think. As far as Judaism is concerned, it's what you do. So doing is important as far as Judaism is concerned. Believing is important as far as Christianity is concerned. Protestant sect membership is primarily defined by beliefs. One cannot become a member of a church until one publicly accepts the Christian faith as dictated by a specific church and is thus baptized into that church. Christianity has fewer practices and instead places more emphasis on one's private communications with God. And that is the most important part, is the fact that you're communicating with your God. Reflecting the differential emphasis on practices and beliefs, a survey asked Jewish and Protestant participants how important practices and beliefs were for being religious. The results revealed that Jewish participants rated practices as more important than beliefs for being religious, whereas Protestants put greater emphasis on beliefs than practices. So if you're Jewish, it's what you do. And if you're Protestant, it's what you believe. Well, let me give you an example. Once upon a time, Jimmy Carter was running for president of the United States. And Jimmy Carter gave an interview to Playboy, which was a bit interesting in itself. But Jimmy Carter's a practicing Baptist. And Jimmy Carter said in his interview that sometimes he lusted in his heart. Now, as far as Protestants are concerned, thinking about being adulterous is just as bad as being adulterous. But of course, as far as Jewish people are concerned, if you think about it, it's not bad. But if you do it, then that's a sin. So as far as Judaism is concerned, you have to do it in order to sin. As far as Protestants are concerned, you have even if you think about it, it's a sin. Jewish and Protestant participants were asked to evaluate a story of a married man contemplating having an affair with a woman in his office. All participants viewed extramarital liaisons as immoral, but the Protestants saw thinking about having an affair as sinful as having an affair. The Jewish participants limit their moral domain to what people do, not what they think. And this, of course, reflects back on the Jimmy Carter story. Jimmy Carter, of course, became president. He was elected in 1976. He ran against Gerald Ford, and he won the election. And some people think that it was that Playboy interview that put him over the top. The fact that he admitted that he had thoughts that were impure or immoral made people think, well, this is somebody who will be a moral person because he recognizes what is immoral, and just thinking about immorality is as bad as being immoral. Distributing resources, you can distribute resources by the principle of need, culture of fairness. This has to do with the culture of fairness. Distributing resources, you can distribute resources by the principle of need, which dictates that resources are directed to those who need them the most. So if I have $5 and I don't need that $5, I need to give it to somebody who needs the money. Principle of equality dictates that resources should be shared equally among members of a group. So if I have $5 and there are two of us, then I should give the other person $2.50 because they don't have any money, and we need to distribute it equally. So I have $2.50 and they have $2.50. Principles of equity states that resources are distributed based on an individual's contributions. The more an individual produces, the more resources they receive. When I was in college, I worked during the summer, I worked at a factory, and in that factory, we did piecework from time to time. And when I made more pieces than anybody else, I made more money than anybody else. And I thought that was a pretty good deal. I liked that because I was pretty quick. I was a 20-year-old, and my hands could move really fast. And some of these guys were old, drunk people that didn't move nearly as fast as I did. And I thought that was a pretty good deal. And that's the principle of equity. The more an individual produces, the more resources they receive. That didn't happen very often, I have to admit. Usually, I was just on salary, so we didn't do piecework very often. It really all depended on who we were working for. It was a automotive pumps and parts factory, and we made water pumps for different vehicles. So when we made when we made Cadillac water pumps, the Cadillac water pumps were all salary because they were so big. But when we made Chevrolet parts, we were paid by the part because they were much smaller and they were a lot easier to manipulate. And they didn't get so bogged down in the line because the Cadillac water pump weighed about 25 pounds. So it was really hard to manipulate. But and it was made out of cast iron. The Chevrolet water pump was made out of aluminum, and it was a lot easier to manipulate. A lot easier to mess up too. But anyway. Distributing resources, a social system that rewards individuals on the basis of equity principle is known as a meritocracy. And meritocracies tend to be more common in individualistic societies. They can lead workers to be highly motivated to work hard because their earnings depend on their efforts. When one worker does well, others tend to do worse. And this is one of the reasons why we didn't do piecework very often. When we did piecework, because I was young and I was very agile, I would make a lot more parts than anybody else. And when I made more parts, then they would change the standard because they didn't want to keep paying me a lot of money. So the administration would change the number of parts that or the amount of money you got per part. If we were making $1 for every water pump that I turned out, and I'm making 20 or 30 in an hour, that's a lot of money, and they didn't want to pay that much out. So what they did, they lowered the rate to 75 cents a part, and that was okay for me because, well, it wasn't okay for me. I wasn't making as much money, but that was really bad for those old drunk guys that could only make 5 or 6 parts per hour. So because I was doing better, they had to lower the percentage, and at that point, of course, those old drunk guys were in really big trouble. So what they would do, I would work. My line would work for 30 minutes, and then I'd take a break for 30 minutes so that the other guys could catch up with me. It was really kind of strange. Either that, or they wouldn't provide as many parts to my line as they did to other people's lines. They would serve them first, and then I got whatever was left over. Meritocratic systems tend to breed competition among the workers, and that's what happened. They 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 told me to slow down, and I said, well, I need to make money so I can go to college. And they said, yeah, but he's feeding his family. I said, yeah, I'm feeding my family, and of course, the way they controlled it was by not giving me as many parts to work on. Uh, they distributed the parts to everybody else before they distributed them to me. And of course, I didn't have anything to do with how many parts everybody got. So it was really kind of an interesting situation. In some organizations, raises are distributed by longevity. The system is known as a seniority system. Seniority systems follow the principle of equality because there is no competition between the workers. Pay is determined using the same formula for everyone. And this is kind of the way it is. It's a seniority system in the United States military. If all the staff sergeants, I was an E5, all the staff sergeants don't get the same amount of pay. The people that have been staff sergeants the longest are the ones that get more pay because there is a longevity formula into how much money people are paid. So if I've been in for 5 years and somebody else has been in for 10 years and we're both the same rank, I won't be making nearly as much money as he is making, or she is making, whichever the case may be. It is often assumed that merit-based pay is the way to ensure the greatest amount of effort from one's employees. However, Japanese workers have traditionally been among the hardest working in the world. There tends to be a great deal of voluntary overtime, and many workers never take their vacations. And Japanese companies tend to have more seniority-based pay than American organizations, even though yeah, and you can see they have a tradition in Japan that you work yourself until you're so tired that you take a nap. And that's what these three people are doing. He's taking a nap, he's taking a nap, and he's taking a nap. And that's okay because that is accepted practice. You take a nap and then you work. You get the job done, and that's the way it works in Japan. Social scientists have developed various economic games to measure people's sense of fairness. In the coin flip scenario, and the coin flip scenario is the Dictator Game. The coin flip scenario, you are given $100 that has been given to you instead of another person by means of a coin flip. You can give the other person any portion of the $100, but they will never know who you are. So what do you do? So here you have somebody flipped a coin and they gave you $100 because you won the coin flip. The other person got zero. They didn't get anything at all. Now they're not going to know what happened. They don't know that they don't have that they didn't get any money. They just know they don't know anything. And if you give them some money, they'll never know that you're the one that gave them the money. So the question is, do you keep the whole $100 or do you give them some of the money? That's the question. Or you can make your decision. You want to keep the $100 or do you want to give them the $100 or do you want to give them a proportion of the $100? You don't have to give them anything. You can keep it all. Now, you guys are psychologists. You're not business people. So I'm assuming, well, I can't assume anything. This is known as a dictator game, and there are various outcomes. Economic theory dictates that the rational person will give their invisible partner nothing because they will never know who you are, and you don't stand to gain anything from them. So if you can't get anything from them, why give them anything? That's the economic theory. So that's what Patrick Blackwater would say. That's what James Denny would say. All those interesting people in the business department say, don't give them a dime. Curiously, the economic theory almost never happens. People around the world feel that keeping all the money for themselves is just not right. And it just seems fair to give the other person some money. The most common decision that people make is a 50-50 split. Even though they don't know who gave them the money, You don't get anything out of it. You still feel that they deserve to have $50. When economists found that even Western college students were making irrational decisions in the dictator game by giving away money that would not benefit them, they sought an explanation. This did not fit any economic models that they had developed. It just didn't fit with their mindset. These crazy kids, what's wrong with them? They should have kept the whole pile of $100 bills, of $1 bills. A surprise to everyone, people in the United States averaged the highest amount of money to be to the invisible partner in the dictator game, $47. Now, we're supposed to be greedy. We're Americans. We're supposed to be greedy people. But here we are. We gave them more money than anybody else did. Why? Factors that dictated the concept of fairness included the amount of calories negotiated at market for food and being a member of a world religion, Christianity and Islam, where God observes one's fairness. So it's karma. It's going to come back at you. What comes around, comes around, goes around. What goes around comes around. That's what it is. What goes around comes around. Or God's always looking at you, and that entity, that authority figure, knows exactly what you've done. And this guy's peeing in the ocean, and God is pissed off that he's urinating in this clean water. Another game is the public goods game. A group of 4 people are given $10 each. If the individuals donate all their money into a common pool, they are all rewarded with 1.6 times the pot, or $64, and each person gets $16. However, if one person holds their $10 out, the pot only ends up at $48, and they will each get $12. The free rider will get $22. So if everybody donates all their $10, then everybody gets $16. And then the next time, everybody's going to have $22 because they get $6 more. And if everybody donates again, they'll have $28. Everybody will have $28. But if you're a free rider, you get $22, and everybody else just gets $12. So the next time, if they put in their $10 and 2 people don't put in their money, then everybody will get $5. All of a sudden, they're losing money. Pretty soon, they don't have any money to put in the pot. But you've got more money than anybody else. You've got $22. As the number of rounds increased, the researchers found that the group made less and less money because the temptation to be a free rider was just too great. Because of this, the researchers decided to add a new factor to the game. So all of a sudden, people weren't making any money. Nobody was making money. Well, the free rider always got his $22, if there was $22 to be had. Now, if there were only $20 in the pot and there were 2 free riders, each of them got $10, and those other 2 people got nothing. If there was 1 free rider, everybody got $12, and the free rider got $22. If there was only 1 person that put $10 in the pot, he got nothing, and everybody else got $3. So all of a sudden, nobody's making any money. A player could now, so they changed the rules because there were too many free riders. So they changed the rules. A player could now pay $1 of their own money and have one of the free riders forfeit $3. The players seemed perfectly willing to pay their own money to get another player punished. The researchers found that with the punishment rule, cooperation increased quite dramatically and remained stable across time. Because if you were a free rider, you would get punished. Okay. The researchers proposed that a key factor that allowed human cooperation to evolve was people's willingness to engage in this kind of altruistic punishment. By feeling motivated to punish those who weren't cooperating, people were able to ensure that group members didn't free ride, which allowed humans to develop norms for cooperation and for large societies to flourish. No free riders. Dump them off. When the public goods game was played around the world, altruistic punishment was practiced. However, in addition to the tendency for altruistic punishment, in many societies, people showed strong tendencies for what researchers called antisocial punishment. So they just wanted to punish people for the joy of punishing people. The researchers found that some people were willing to pay their own money to punish another player, even if that player was cooperating. And this is why they called it antisocial punishment. The motivation for this antisocial punishment seemed to be largely a function of revenge, in which people would punish a player who had punished them on a previous round. Although this tendency for antisocial punishment was negligible in weird societies, Western Western societies, in other societies this behavior predominated. So it wasn't that common in the United States, wasn't that common in Europe, but there were some places where antisocial punishment was very common. Antisocial punishment predominates in Oman more than any other country. And Oman, of course, is one of those small countries at the base of the Arabian Peninsula, the Arabian structure where Saudi Arabia is. Yemen is there. Oman is another of the countries right at the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula. Antisocial punishment predominates in Greece as the second highest level measured. In Greece. Antisocial punishment predominates in Saudi Arabia as the third highest level measured. Now we're talking about the Arabian Peninsula. So Oman is in the Arabian Peninsula, and so is Saudi Arabia. Antisocial punishment predominates in Russia as the fourth highest level measured. Antisocial punishment. The notion that punishment promotes cooperation holds true only in societies characterized by norms for civic cooperation and high levels of trust. Antisocial punishment was entirely unexpected by the researchers who first discovered it, but it appears to be quite commonplace in many cultures, and it remains somewhat puzzling. Why does it exist in those two Arab countries, Oman and Saudi Arabia? Why does it exist in Greece? Why does it exist in Russia? The researchers' data shows that societies with weaker norms for civic cooperation and a weaker rule of law engaged in more antisocial punishment in public goods games. Other researchers argue that antisocial punishment can be adaptive in contexts where the rule of law is insufficient. So if your laws are insufficient, and is this the way it is in Saudi Arabia and Oman? Yes, it is, because in Saudi Arabia and Oman, there are royal families in both those countries. So if you're a commoner in both those countries, you're kind of out of luck because the royal families can do anything they want. There is no sense of civic cooperation. In dealing with a system that can't always be trusted to function, people come up with alternative ways to ensure that their needs are met. In Brazil, there is a complex sociocultural strategy termed Jetimbo, or Yetimbo. I guess it's pronounced Yetimbo since it's Portuguese, Yetimbo, by which people manipulate or dodge the official rules to achieve things. And this is a picture of people taking a test in Brazil. And as you can see, they have told them that they have to put because cheating is so common, that they have to put headbands with sheets of paper on them so they won't cheat. And this is a college class. as you can see, Yettenbo. A real-life example of these weaker norms for civic cooperation can be seen in the game show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Now, this isn't on in the United States. It started in England. The show originally was created in England. Contestants are able to use a lifeline and can poll the studio audience for help in answering a difficult question. Who wants to be a millionaire? If you watched it in the United States, you know that if you can answer enough questions, then potentially you can make $1 million. When Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was introduced in Russia, the contestants quickly found out that they couldn't trust the audience. Frequently, the audience members would deliberately choose the wrong answer in an apparent effort to mislead the contestants. Not unlike the public goods game, many members of the Russian audience seem to be more motivated to sabotage the play of contestants than to help them. As the Brafman brothers in 2009 have said, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russians became suspicious of those who were trying to profit off the hard work of others. Norms of civic cooperation remain relatively low in Russia and many other societies around the world, which makes it more difficult for governments to band citizens together in cooperative ventures. And of course, one of the things that has happened in the old Soviet Union, in the new Russia, is that the oligarchs, these very wealthy people, the Russian mafia, have accumulated billions and billions of dollars, and they're hiding them all over the world. And this is one of the reasons why what is happening around the world, where they're seizing these god-awful yachts that are worth $500 million. They're seizing them, trying to punish these oligarchs for the invasion of Russia or of the Ukraine. Another thing interesting thing that's happening in Russia is that LGBTQ rights groups are springing up, and one of these groups is known as Pussy Riot. They're a band, and they play from time to time, and they get arrested all the time. But when they did the World Cup, was it the World Cup in Moscow? No, it was one of the Olympic Games in Moscow. One of these ladies ran on the field and kissed one of the participants, stopped the game. This is one of the members of that group, Pussy Riot, and there they are. Oh, here it is. This was between Croatia and France. Mbappe is the French star. They also had they're a band, like I said, and they play all this revolutionary music. And they have to wear the balaclavas, the very colorful balaclavas, in order to hide their identity so they won't be arrested in Russia. The individual that is shown in this picture was arrested, and she has been in jail for the last 2 years. And I think she's about to get out of prison, but we're not exactly sure what's going on as far as that group is concerned. But they are demonstrating against the oligarchy that exists in Russia. They do not like Vladimir Putin. And of course, you can listen to their music. Type in their name, Pussy Riot, and you can listen to some of their protest music. Fascinating stuff. Anyway, there you go. That is the end of the chapter.